Hello and welcome to At the Leadership Table with retired Major General Jim Hoyer. Oftentimes people hear the word leader and they think only of political leaders, but leaders come in many forms, and that's worth exploring. I'm Jim Hoyer, born and raised in West Virginia, a husband, a father, a new grandfather, and a retired military leader, serving for over 40 years in public leadership for our state and nation. Now, the most important mission I have going forward is to educate, motivate, and empower our next generation of leaders. At the leadership table with us today is Joelle Moray. Joelle is a best-selling author, a TEDx speaker, also a licensed professional counselor, and nationally recognized advocate for transforming workplace culture. Through her work with organizations across the country, Joelle helps leaders and teams with creativity, productivity, and building a culture of care. She resides in Wheeling, West Virginia, so is a West Virginia Wheeling-based business leader and leader in the community. And Joelle, we are excited to have you on At the Leadership Table today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. It's quite an honor to be here. I love always any chance I could be in Morgantown. It's a great day.
So we're going to start out by asking you the same first question we ask all of our guests. Please share with us a standout moment when you learned something really important about leadership.
Such a great question. There was a period of time when, I was very young in my career, obviously, right? So sort of right out of undergraduate school. And I remember someone coming to me and said, welcome aboard, welcome on being here. And they said, just listen for the first 6 months. You're going to have ideas, you're going to have, contributions and all of those things. But when you first come in, learn everything you can about every department, learn everything you can about every person here, and just observe and listen. And I thought that was so poignant because, I think a lot of times we don't think of ourselves as leaders until someone reports to us, or we don't think of ourselves as leaders until we have some sort of title. And one of the other things is that we get so excited we want to just jump in and start sharing our ideas, and we see things a certain way. And I thought that was such an important lesson in leadership that I didn't even realize I was being developed for leadership at that point because I was so young, but such a great thing.
And an important lesson about balancing as you come into to a new organization.
Yeah.
So you've got experience both at the corporate side and the communications side. You've also done counseling work, and now you're focused on helping organizations rethink how they work.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to be so passionate about transforming workplace culture.
Yes, so I have been very, very blessed and fortunate in my career. I spent a lot of time in the public sector in West Virginia. I was the marketing director for the city of Wheeling. I then went to work for a regional economic development partnership also in Wheeling, so sort of different sides of the same coin, if you will, there. So in that role, did a lot of small business retention and development, economic development efforts there in 3 counties in the Northern Panhandle. And then from there, moved into external affairs and communications for APCO, Appalachian Power. So really have been in and around the space of community development, economic development, and those sorts of leadership type of roles throughout the state of West Virginia. And I've been very, very blessed. Had a wonderful career, no regrets whatsoever. However, I started noticing a pattern in both myself and my colleagues and also my friends and other people who loved what they were doing, but were really exhausted, right? Really starting to just kind of burn out and losing their passion for their work, and not really having any language for it, but also not really having any tools for it as well. And especially in a place like West Virginia, we want to keep people here and we want to attract other people here as well. And so if people are quitting their jobs or leaving the area because they're just tired, or they just don't have an outlet or the tools to help them navigate the normal ebbs and flows of life, I want to do something about that. And so that started planting a seed in me several years ago. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to impact yet, but that's kind of where that came from.
So I think I might be an example of the next question. You have put a lot of focus on helping people and organizations deal with what is called the hustle culture. So tell us about and define for us the hustle culture, and what parts of this culture do you think impact individuals and organizations, and how do you help them get over that?
Yeah, so I love talking about the hustle culture. So the hustle culture is basically this sort of colloquialism that has come about that describes the way that we work. And when I say we, I mean people primarily in the United States or in the Western part of the world. The way that we work, this idea that we have to be on all the time, we have to be connected all the time in order to be seen as someone who's valuable and contributing to the organization, or to feel like we're giving enough. And we have this great generation, not the greatest generation, they are the greatest generation, I'm talking about Generation X, which I am a part, that we have some work ethic. We were taught you get up in the morning and you go to work and you contribute to your community. The challenge is that the pendulum has swung a little bit too far in the other direction, and we just don't know how to turn that off now. And so it's this idea of just being constantly connected. And then of course, as technology and innovation have continued to evolve, and we now have computers in our pockets that we carry around with us all the time, we feel like we are totally connected all the time. So that's sort of a rough, loose idea of the hustle culture. Always hustling, right, as part of what your normal life is. And so how this is impacting individuals. So we'll talk about individual level and then maybe organizational level.
Okay.
Try to make those distinctions, but also try to be concise as well. On the individual level, the way this is impacting people is we are losing the ability to get deep sleep because our minds are always on. And sleep is fundamental to all sorts of things physiologically, but it's really fundamental to how your brain works and to your mental health as well. So we feel like we just have to always be going. As soon as you wake up in the morning, your first thoughts are typically around your tasks. What do I gotta do today? When do I gotta be there? How should I dress for this? What needs done? Who needs what from me today? And that could be related to your family, it could be related to your professional life, whatever, usually a mix of the two. And so from the minute we wake up in the morning, we just go. And we don't really ever pause, we don't really ever stop, and we are just tasking all day. Now, that is not a negative thing per se, right? It feels good to have a purpose. It feels good to feel like you're contributing something to your family as well as to your community and to the world in general, right? I did something good today, impacted people. It feels really good to accomplish things. The challenge is we don't have an off switch anymore. We've lost the ability to be bored, and that affects things like creativity and productivity, right? So the human brain is not designed for uninterrupted productivity. We are meant to produce and recover, produce and recover. We skip the second part of that too often, right? So on the organizational level, we now have a culture inside of organizations where you have all these people who have that philosophy coming together to work, right? And then depending on the type of organization you work for, whether it's a nonprofit, for-profit, whether you're in sports, whether you're in finance, there's a lot of factors that vary. However, depending on the external forces, such as maybe you have shareholders, maybe you have a board of directors, you have customers or clients, certainly. And so those people are always demanding more from you, right? We gotta be better, faster, produce more, make more money, etc. Be the first to the finish line with some kind of innovation. And so now we just have this cyclical cycle, this rhythm that is just a little out of control, in my opinion.
So I have a feeling that after my wife listens to this episode, that she'll be contacting you because I'm a baby boomer, I guess, but apparently I've been told by her on several occasions that I don't have an off switch. So apparently I might need some assistance in that. So
I hear that very often.
and I guess that leads to the fact that we do, and I see and saw with leading the 6,500 guardsmen in uniform and 2,500 civilians that we seemed like, particularly in West Virginia, we were always on. It was either a deployment overseas or responding to an emergency and trying to reinforce to our guardsmen and our civilian employees that you've got to focus on family. Because if you lose that family focus, and a victim of that as well. So tell me a little bit about, people always have this constant demand for time, and how do you help and give advice on creating the right culture with the right values and managing that time?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your service. And secondly, thank you for your candor about how that's sort of impacted your life and what you've experienced. And I hear this story over and over and over again. And again, sort of regardless of industry, right? I work with nonprofits, I work with professional sports teams, and everything in between. And I hear that story over and over and over. And so again, this is sort of why I'm so passionate about this, right? Is to have us have this conversation. So what we really work with leaders about is we're not suggesting to not be high achievers. In fact, quite the opposite. Anyone who knows me will tell you I am the face of the hustle culture, right? I am a very high achiever, and I like being a high achiever. What we work with is helping you understand the rhythm of your life, the sort of cadence of your life, whether that's at work or beyond when you're not working. And so we have developed, my team and I have actually conducted research, our own primary research, and we're very excited about it. Our findings are hopefully getting published very soon. So depending on when this airs, maybe it's already published. But what we have found is that there are sort of 5 things that drive company culture that can impact whether or not your people are burning out or whether they are not burning out, right? And those 5 things are how decisions are made and then how it's communicated out, how work moves between people, so what's the sort of handoff point, right? Hey, I'm asking you to do this thing, did it get done, etc. And then how our time is structured, which is probably one of the biggest ones. What gets modeled by leadership? So what gets modeled by leadership is the culture, period, hard stop, right? You could say all day long what your values and vision and mission are on your website or the walls of your business, but what the behavior of the leadership team is, that is your culture, right? So what gets modeled by leadership? And then finally, but certainly not least, is how is stress recovery normalized within the organization? So those are the sort of 5 drivers that we found that truly impact culture. So we work with teams on understanding what those are. We get kind of really deep into that. And then we have very specific tools that are all clinically informed, evidence-based tools that help them say, okay, if we could make this one small tweak to your organization, not only will your people feel better and have more energy and be happier, their productivity is going to soar. So if you want more out of your people, this is the pathway to do that. So we're not suggesting let's all take a meditative break in the middle of the day, although I'm here for that if that's what you want to do. But we have very specific kind of protocols that we know based on all of our work, how the human brain works, when you're at peak productivity, and when you need a little bit of recovery, right?
Yeah. So I'll go back to my personal example, and so I got so focused on the mission, and I thought that if I was focused on the mission, I was taking care of the family, that I lost sight of the importance of spending too much or enough focus on family. So that led to us getting divorced, and I've married the same woman twice, so we've had the chance to redo it.
Wow.
And in the redo, as I spent time with soldiers and civilian employees in the Guard, I made sure to tell that story because ours was a great story and lucky in that we found our way back, right, and got it leveled out, but apparently I haven't leveled it out quite as I should. But so how do you work with executives, particularly in that regard, to keep that focus so that they can balance that? And that has a whole lot of cultural impact too, right? Because if we're continuing to churn divorce rates across West Virginia and across the country, we're clearly impacting our overall productivity as a nation, right?
That's right, yeah. Oh my goodness, I love this conversation so much. And that's such a powerful story that you have to tell. right? Directly how this has impacted your life. And again, we hear this story almost on repeat, and sometimes it's divorce, other times it's health. There definitely, you're gonna have some kind of an impact somewhere in your life for sure if you ignore this, right? So when we sit down with executives, we first have a pretty deep conversation, right? I get in there. I'm not here to tell you how great things are. I'm not here to beat you up too bad either, but we're gonna go there, right? We're gonna have some tough conversations at first because I wanna understand truly where their mindset is. What is their expectation of their people and what are their goals? Sometimes outcomes, how are you defining success within your organization? So let's start there. What are your typical avenues for sort of incentivizing your team or inspiring your team or motivating the team to help you achieve those goals? And then based on those conversations, we can really, truly understand the psyche of the leader and the goal of the organization. And usually when we start to find some cracks in the culture, and this is not to say, by the way, organizations who come to me are not necessarily on fire, right? They're not necessarily like, oh, we know that our culture is terrible and we don't know how to turn it around. That's not typically it. A lot of times these are very thoughtful leaders who say, our people are happy, we want to keep them that way, right? Or we notice that this kind of trend is happening every year in the third quarter of the year. This tends to happen, and we're just struggling to figure out why. So people it's not always they come to me in crisis, right? Other times they come to me because they just want to keep their people happy. So we have these really deep conversations. I want to know what are the goals of the organization, what are the mechanisms that you're currently using for that, and where do they think the gaps are? And then I'm on the outside, right? So I see their gaps a little differently. So I'm kind of here as the blind spot reflector. Right, here's where I see your blind spot, and here's where I kind of see the solution for that, and we're going to get you there. And then typically what will happen is an organization comes in for maybe a leadership retreat. We'll go off-site or something for a leadership team and spend a day or two or sometimes 3 kind of getting real deep into some of this stuff. And at the end of it, they say, when can you come back? So we also have a mechanism where we're in an organization sometimes for a year or more, kind of on this regular cadence, checking in with staff and saying how are things going and making sure we're using these tools.
So in today's world where we hear constantly that we've got to figure out how to implement AI to make us more efficient and effective, I assume that there's opportunities for some of the folks out there listening who are running organizations to reach out to you. Maybe it's not an organization in crisis, but you're wanting to continue to develop that organization to be a better place to work and be more effective. They can come to you in that regard as well, correct?
That's right, absolutely. So I love the question about AI because that's an external environmental factor that's causing change in organizations. I'm not saying that changes are bad, but anytime you have a change, it creates a little bit of uncertainty internally, right? Some people might have to develop new skill sets. We're not quite sure how we're gonna use this in our business, but we also know we want to use this in our business, right? And so, yes, that I hear that a lot, and we're seeing that a lot as well. One of the things that people are talking about regarding AI is that we have to keep the humanness in your organization. Right, and so how do we do that? And that is absolutely one of the things that we can address with some of this stuff, which is really cool, right? When you think about it, we're talking about human beings. We aren't machines. We are human beings, and we've got to keep that humanness in, right? So human-centered culture.
So you're able to pull together your experience in government, nonprofit, your experience in the corporate side, and your counseling degree, kind of pull all these things together. So whether it's a team member or a leader on a team, what's one of the first things you see that you can recommend that they implement to make an impact immediately?
Yeah, I love that question. Of those 5 pillars we were talking about, we right off the bat, we can look at how time is structured and what's getting modeled by leadership, right? What are you actually doing currently? And that's not to say what you're doing is wrong or bad or anything like that. None of this is meant to be, here's the bad and here's what's going to make it better. We're just looking for the data, right? And so of those 5 pillars, again, how time is structured and what is leadership doing. So for example, we look at how time is structured in a couple of different ways. One is, why are your meetings 60 minutes? And most people can't answer that question. We don't know why. Well, I don't know, because that sounds like a good number, right? So what happens is we have 60-minute meetings that are stacked on top of each other, right? We have a 9 and a 10 and an 11 and a 12 and both, right? So first of all, when are you eating?
Right.
When are you taking a swig of water? When's that happening? And so we leave one meeting early to get to the next meeting late, even if they're virtual, right? We're just always behind the 8 ball a little bit. So why is your day structured like that? And it's interesting because most people can't really answer that question. So what if we looked at maybe structuring meetings for 45 minutes or 50 minutes? I just found you 10 or 15 minutes every hour, right? So now what do we do with that 10 or 15 minutes? Well, hopefully it's not more work. Hopefully this isn't the time that we hurry up and check in on email, right? There's been a couple of super interesting studies on how time is structured and how we use that. One of them was right here at WVU, if I could talk about that in just a second. There's another study that was done, not the WVU study, that found that if they gave people 10 or 15 minutes in between meetings, but didn't tell them what to do with that time, they just let them figure it out for themselves. There's going to be a certain percentage of employees that go, perfect, now I can check up on my email, I got to get back to this person, this person's waiting on something from me. The other kind of section of employees were like, cool, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to walk outside, I'm going to, not scroll on the internet, but I'm going to seriously get a drink of water, go to the restroom, some basically get a snack, right, and then come back. Those who actually took that little bit of a break versus the ones who didn't, the ones who took that little bit of a break were significantly more creative, productive, and engaged in the next meeting, right? So that's one study that was done. The WVU study that I talk about all the time, that I get super passionate about, is one that was published in 2018. And it really was looking at the effects of music on the brain. So this study was funded by the Alzheimer's Association, and they had some really cool findings in this study. But what they found was that people who took a pause for 12 minutes a day, 12 minutes of intentional pausing to do nothing else but listen to this piece of music, and the treatment group was given a specific meditation to do in that same 12 minutes. But regardless of it was the control group or the treatment group, 12 minutes of some intentional pausing, cognitive pausing, right? What they found was there were some really interesting implications for cognitive health. But regardless of that, almost every participant in this study had improvements in sleep, focus, memory, productivity, and happiness, right? That study was done right here at WVU. 12 minutes of saying, I'm going to take a little time out just to go sit over here, right? 12 minutes. That other study I was telling you about was also about 10 or 15 minutes. So we have this sort of benchmark of between 10 to 15 minutes is really kind of all you need to do a little bit of a cognitive reset. Another study that was done, was published in the the Kansas Journal of Medicine from 2021, found that psychological well-being was the #1 predictor of productivity in the workplace. When you are well, you produce better. When you are stressed, you're literally not in your right mind. So we have all this data, and then our team conducted its own primary research and basically found the same thing. You only need a little window of time for, again, that productivity and recovery, right? And if I could give a quick example.
Sure.
I love sports analogies and music analogies. I happen to be a musician myself, so that's always one I'm going to use. If you're playing an instrument, you're not playing that instrument uninterrupted for the entirety of the piece of that music. At some point, you are pausing. It might just be for a breath. It might be for a couple of measures or something, but you're not playing that entire time, right? You're going to have times when you're kind of stepping out and another person involved in that orchestra or that band or whatever is kind of stepping in, right? So that's the music metaphor. The sports metaphor, maybe more people can understand. The quarterback does not play for 60 minutes of play. The game is 60 minutes. The quarterback ain't playing 60 minutes, right? And he comes off the field, right, for a short period of time and then goes back in. Or conversely, let's say you're watching a game and someone sort of gets their bell rung a little bit, right? Not game-ending injury, something like that, but they just what happens? They come off the field, they take their helmet off, they sit down, someone walks over to them and says, hey man, how you doing? They get a drink, right? They take a couple breaths, they get all checked out, they literally get their head back on straight, and then and only then do they get back in the game. All of this is normalized everywhere except in executives and in the workplace, right? We have high-performing people in the workplace who are expected to be high achievers without ongoing coaching or help. And it's the only place in the world where that happens. In sports, you have coaches forever, right? Imagine if you're watching the Super Bowl and there were no coaches because they thought, oh, they've got it. They've been doing this for 20 years, right? They have been doing this for 20 years. They know what they're doing. They're at the top of their game. What are we going to possibly help them with? That would be insane, right? So why is it that in the workplace that's not normalized?
Yeah.
So we have achievement and productivity are expected, but ongoing support and development isn't normalized in the workplace. It's bizarre to me. So these are the things we.
And I think the great thing here too is you've got somebody with your expertise right here in West Virginia that's doing this and helping West Virginia business leaders, West Virginia employees.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to you. Well, a couple of things. One is you've had to put some of this in practice yourself because we talked before that we got started on the podcast that you became a mom times 2 right during COVID.
Yeah.
So tell a little bit about how you used some of this yourself as you became a mom and were managing being a business leader and a leader and also managing the challenges we all faced during COVID.
Yeah, so it's so funny because I'm an author and my first book came out a couple years ago, and so many people come to me and they say, you know who needs to read your book? You do. So I thank you for that question. It's an honesty question too, and I need it. I really do practice what I preach. I truly and honestly do. I'm not perfect at it. There are certainly days where the hustle wins.
Right.
And there are certainly days that other people and other things get my energy and attention, maybe beyond what I have capacity for. But I am much better at recovery now than I ever have been. So I absolutely practice the things that I preach for sure. Maybe much to the chagrin of some of my family and friends if I put up some boundaries sometimes or whatever. And again, certainly not perfect at it. But in terms of how my time is structured, I really take that one very seriously. And the other, we talked a little bit about time structure, but there's also a lot more nuance to that, right? If you're a person who, you're a morning person, but you're trying to do some heavy thinking in the afternoon, that's not going to match, right? And so I know myself and my own rhythms. I know that I am cognitively my sharpest in the morning and the early part of the day through like mid-afternoon, but I also have a lot of physical energy later in the day. So I, for a long time, was in the hustle. So I was like the 5 a.m. club, and I'm going to go do, whatever, heavy workouts first thing in the morning. And I realized I actually have more physical energy later in the day. So for me, I still get the workout in, but I'm much better at it if it's later in the day for me, right? So those kind of small tweaks have been really helpful, and constantly learning myself and tweaking as I go, right? Biologically, we all change as we age, and so your physical needs and your cognitive needs change as you age. So I really do try to practice what I preach in that. So I just realized recently, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm really sharp in the morning. So I am not going to be like editing spreadsheets in the afternoon. My brain just doesn't do that. And I also switched my morning workout to the afternoon because it's just when my energy's better. So I try to practice it. And I also really try to, I'm not working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. I'm just not going to do that, right? And I really enjoy my downtime. And I became a mom late in life, so I don't want to miss it.
Right.
I want to be around for it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, oh, mom has to work. Sometimes I do. I travel nationally talking about this stuff. But on the days, say like the day after I come back from some kind of travel somewhere, I'm like, yep, nothing on my calendar. I'm going to be here for the family.
So 2-part question as we close out. So you mentioned to me as we got started that you were actually born across the river from Wheeling, but you've twice now come back to Wheeling. So tell me a little bit about what were the things that drove you back to Wheeling and to stay in Wheeling that are different, that highlight the benefits of being in West Virginia.
For sure. So the quality of life in terms of recreational things that you can do, entertainment things you can do. There's a joke that a bunch of us have in Wheeling, which is you have to find reasons to stay home because there's so much to do in the area all the time. There's constantly things to do. And I really like that. I like the pace of life here. It's very different. I lived in New York City for a while. It's very different in West Virginia than there, and I kind of like it here. it's a little less expensive than other places in the country, frankly. And where we live, Northern Panhandle, you're close to Pittsburgh, you're close to Cleveland, you're close to these other kind of big metro areas, close to Morgantown, frankly. And so I like that a lot. I like the pace of it, and you can do anything from West Virginia, right? I am literally I did develop this business in my den of my house, right? And we now have national reach. We're going all kinds of places, probably internationally soon as well. And so, from little old Wheeling, West Virginia, you can be a TED speaker, a best-selling author. I work with teams in the NFL. I travel nationally. I was just in Oregon, recently, and it's just amazing. I've been to, I work with groups out of Destin, Florida. It's all over the place. And you can do that even if you're running a business out of your house or some small office somewhere right here in West Virginia. It can be done.
So that's an amazing story, and you're both a business leader, a community leader, a parent. What's your vision for the future of West Virginia and Appalachia going forward, knowing you've achieved that level of success from West Virginia?
My vision I love this question too. My vision for West Virginia is that we could culturally be a place where people live a really long time. So we have a high life expectancy, and the quality of those lives are exponentially better, right? That we have this rhythm of our life where we are in community with each other, we are moving our bodies naturally, it's kind of the premise of what's known as the blue zones, right? That we have some connection to our community, and that we take care of each other, and we can sit on our porch and have coffee with our neighbor, getting back to kind of these basics, the things that our grandparents did.
Right.
That, I'm not suggesting everyone grows their own vegetables, but, eat healthy food, take care of your mental health, and not having your vocation be the thing that defines who you are as a human being, but rather, how are you showing up in the world? How do you want to show up in the world? What do you want your impact to be, right? And I would love it if we could stop introducing ourselves by asking, what is it that you do? I would much rather us ask better questions than that when we meet people. So that's my kind of vision for West Virginia, is that this is a place that you can do anything from here. We are innovative, and we're the leaders in the country in this type of work.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Joelle Moray, excited to learn that we have a best-selling author, speaker, somebody who consults with organizations of all sizes across the country, right here in West Virginia, in Wheeling, West Virginia. And thank you for the great work you're doing and for joining us at the leadership table today.
Thank you very much, General. It's so nice to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. This has been At the Leadership Table with retired Major General Jim Hoyer. Did you know you can now find me on social media at RMG Hoyer? That's HOYER.
I'm not kidding.
Or email
I would make you
me
be my life
at
coach. How do you do that?
rmgjameshoyer@gmail.com.